Hey, welcome to the channel. Today's video will be doing a refactoring of a coding exercise that I saw. I saw some deficiencies or ways that the code could be improved, and thus we have this video. Let's get started. Hey, my name is Kenny. I'm the owner of Robinson Handy and Technology Services based in Montgomery, Alabama. Today we are doing a technology video. We are discussing a coding project or a coding assignment. I don't know if you want to call it a project or not because it's not really that big. Someone posted in the self-taught programmers group this code as you see here. And it says a program to calculate the mean of students in a college for 12 units in an automotive engineering course. Now, as you see, this code is written in C, if not maybe C++. I believe someone did comment and say it might be C as the programming language. Nonetheless, I am still going to do this in C#. And also I'm going to simplify this. So let's do a walkthrough of said code. So we have the including of standard libraries, input and output. And scrolling down, we have our main method. We have a declaration of several integer variables. Continuing further down, we are taking in a value for each of the 12 units. And then after doing all of those 12 units, you're doing a calculation, A, B, C, D, E, and so forth. Then dividing that by 12, then printing out the mean value, and then doing the same calculation again and dividing it by 12 and getting the remainder, and then exiting out of the program. Now, this is a lot of lines of code, and I know there's a way that this could be simplified without having to do it this long way. Let's get started. Also, if you want a copy of the source code, the link to the GitHub repository with this source code will be available down in the description. All right, let's jump to the code. All right, I've already created my .NET Core, .NET 5 console application for this. And this is what you get. You get the basic main method with a hello world inside of it. All right, so I'm going to be switching back and forth between the two because, well, I probably could put both items up on the screen at the same time. Let's see if we can do that there and that there. Okay, and we can close the sidebar over here. All right, one thing that I did note that I am missing is a gitignore file. So let's go ahead and do that down here in the terminal. Let's close that sidebar really quickly. And in the terminal, .NET new gitignore. All right, and we should have a gitignore file, well, ls.a. Yes, and we have our gitignore file. All right, so when we compile our project and commit it to our source code, we do not commit the actual executable. We just only commit the source code files. All right, now coming back to the code. All right, so we have a main, and in C# you don't do the including of libraries. Those are, well, you do, but they're called using statements instead of including, include statements. So it's the same thing, but a different concept. For this though, I do not believe that, we only need system because the input and output of a C# application is done from the system library. So we don't need anything else, I do not believe. All right, now it has a number of integers here, and we really don't need that many integers. All right, so let's start with the first one. So we'll do int, and we'll call it, let's do input. And we'll set that to, we'll set it to no value. And the reason to set it to no value is if there was an issue to occur or something like that nature, you would want it to throw an exception. Ideally, you don't throw exceptions, but you would want it to error out in some shape, form, or fashion. All right, and now we have 12 units for this course. So we can create a for loop that says int I equals 1, because we want to start at 1 and not 0 in this particular case, and I'll show you why in a moment. And the GitHub Copilot is kind of helping out here, but it's not quite on the point. It's got the idea. It's using context clues from the name of the project to determine what I'm trying to do, but I'm not going to do exactly what it's suggesting. All right, so we want to do 12 I++. All right, and then we want to console right line right line. Yeah. Let's see, right line. Okay, yeah, because I was trying to determine whether I should use right or right line, and I'm going to use right line because here he has the /n, which means a new character, or excuse me, a new line, or for you Windows people, new line and return feed, I believe is what it's called. Thus, the question comes on one line, the input comes on the second line. So you're going to use right line in this case. If the input and the question were on the same line, you would just use right. All right, so we're going to do enter unit, and then I'm going to put a question mark there, I, and that. Okay, and that looks correct. So enter is going to say, instead of first, second, third, we're going to say enter unit 1, 2, 3, and so forth. And that will simplify the code because we're able to utilize the I variable that is being used as part of our for loop in the question or input as itself. All right, and then we're going to do console read line, and that is, yeah, so we leave that, whoops, empty, and then we're going to say input equals that. Now the problem with this is you actually need to convert it to an integer, and I think I need to do int32.parse. There we go. And then we take the input from console read line, drop that in here, semicolon, delete, and move that back. All right. Now that will take the string, because when you do a read line, it interprets that as a string. And so you have to convert that string to an integer, and then you use that integer however you choose, assuming that is a valid integer. If you do not put a valid integer into here, then your application will throw an exception and will exit out. All right, that being said, so we have our input and we're reading that input. And at the end, so let's do I'm also going to create a variable here that is total. And we're going to set that one to 0 because we always want that to have a value at least. All right, so total plus equals input. And then after all of that, let's see. So the mean is total divided by 12, which is correct. Actually, the mean, let's get the exact message. Mean of a student is, and then you could do string interpolation, but probably should not do that here. So I'm actually, for my sanity, you don't have to wrap it in parentheses, but for my sanity, when I'm doing calculations within something else, I like to put them in parentheses so that I know that is going together, as instead of doing total and then printing divided by 12 or something like that nature. All right. And then the next one is a console dot, not background color, right line. And not quite, we're not there yet. I'm gonna go ahead and leave that there for the sake of it, because I probably actually would need it. GitHub Copilot can be a little bit too smart at times. All right, and then we're going to do remainder. And because he does not have a remainder of a student, I'm just going to do remainder here and total %12, and that'll print the remainder value that is there. All right, and technically this could be simplified even further, but I'm trying to follow what was actually given here. And because I mean, you could return a 0 here, although it's not really necessary, but return 0, but you can't return with a void. And really, yeah, so if we change this to int main, because I forgot he did have a integer main at the top, now we can return that 0 code down here. All right, and just to recap before I run this, As you see, we have our int main and we have our input. And instead of, what's that, 12, 13 variables up here, we have two. We have an input variable and we have a total variable. And to be honest, we probably could get away with just a single variable down here. So let's try to refactor this and do total plus equals and take that out. Okay, and now we have even less code that we have to maintain. All right, so then you take the inner unit and whatever unit it is, so 1 through 12, and then you put that there, add it to the total, and then you go from there. All right, let's continue scrolling through before we get to the end. All right, so each of these has a everything here. Yeah, and that's that. All right, now let's do a clear and we'll do .NET run just to see how this is going to work out. Ideally, it should work fine, but sometimes you may have a bug and you don't even know. All right, so there we go. We have our first one that says enter unit 1, whereas over here he is doing enter the first unit. Same concept, it's just different verbiage. All right, so we're going to do, I'm gonna just type some random numbers in. Whoops. All right. And so as you see, I fat fingered unit 10 with the decimal there. And because of that reason, the input string is not in a valid format. It threw an exception. And that is the result of this int32 parse not being able to parse said input to a integer. Integers don't have decimal places in there. They are whole numbers. That being said, with that decimal in there, it threw the exception, and I need to restart the application again, and this time not fat finger the numbers that I'm putting in. All right, running .NET run again, and we'll do all right. That being said, all of the numbers have been entered, and you have a mean of, is it mean of a student or is it mean of the student? Oh, mean of a student. Okay, not grammatically correct, but just remaking what's already here. So the mean of a student is 80, and the remainder is 4, and then I have to press any key to exit. Actually, there should be a console read line here to make sure that the actual console doesn't stay up on, to make sure that the console actually does stay up on the screen. As you see here, because I'm running it in a terminal window, this window is not going to close itself, but if I was running this externally, it would have. And that is it. And as you see here, this is 25 lines, even with white space, whereas this over here is easily a good 30 to 40 lines. Matter of fact, let me go check and see how many lines it actually is. I went back and pulled the post without the comments over to Visual Studio Code, and as you see, this here without the white space is 35 lines long. And even if I take out the white space that's here, let's see how many more lines I can get out of that. Now, I actually have this same program doing the same functionality in 21 lines without the white space versus 35 lines. And why am I so being persistent about using less code? Well, the reason is if you have less code, basically the simpler the machine is, the easier it is to figure out where problems exist. And a lot of times what I've learned over my years is that some of the newer programmers, they do not understand that code can be simplified, and the reason that you should consider simplifying the code as much as possible. This emphasizes, hey, I can get this down to 21 lines, and if I can do it in 21 lines, and to be all honest, I could actually refactor this probably down a little bit further, because one way I was thinking about doing this was using a while loop and then using a exit, like a -1 or something to exit out of that while loop, and then that simplifies the dividing number, instead of hard coding it to 12, it will be flexible, thus a more reusable application in this context. But the point I'm getting back to, with using less code, it is easier to maintain, it is easier to find bugs if you have bugs in there, and your code is just not bloated. If you follow the several principles like dry, let's go back over here to this particular code here. As you see, this violates dry in several ways. So you have this print whatever unit, that is a violation 12 times. One violation for each one of those. And then the scanf, that is again another violation of the dry principle. For those of you that do not know, dry stands for do not repeat yourself. And this is very repetitive code. And because of the fact it is very repetitive code, I'm able to put it into a for loop and get the same output or the same outcome of the application versus just putting this here line by line. Also, the number of variables that are used. Again, the same concept of do not repeat yourself applies to that as well. Whereas I have, A through N, if you come back to what I've done, I have a single variable here that takes the entire total and tracks it. And now I know what you're saying. Well, if you do that, that way you can't get the individual numbers that have been entered, which is true. However, the way this application is designed and the way the post is originally written, there's no use case for getting the individual numbers. That being said, because there is no use case for getting the individual numbers, I don't design my code to get the individual numbers. Now, could this be redesigned in a way where you could track the individual numbers and still utilize the for loops so that you do not have to repeat yourself? Yes, there is. But in this particular case, I'm not doing that because of the fact I'm trying to mimic exactly how they wrote the code, but at the same time, simplifying it. That being said, that will wrap things up for this video. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to drop those down below. And if you are trying to avoid the comments, you can send a message directly to us, Robinson Handy and Technology Services, using Instagram, RHT Services LLC, or you can go to the website rhtservices.net, where you can send a message from there. Last but not least, please be sure to subscribe. Also, thumbs up. Whoops, can't see it on that side. Thumbs up, please, if you like this content, and come back next week where we'll have a new video. Thank you for watching.